Coming up, I'll discuss the controversy over Brandon Gill's proposed impeachment of Judge Boasberg. I also want to show how Trump might proceed in showing that Biden's pardons are null and void. And I'll reveal the case of a middle school child, which shows the excesses of transgender indoctrination. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or X or Rumble, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the subscribe or follow or the notifications button. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
President Trump says that the JFK files will be released today. And I'm expecting that this is going to be a giant trove of documents. It'll probably take people a long time to get through them. This is an issue that's been around really ever since the JFK assassination. There never really been clarity on what happened. I think most people are by now convinced that there was more than one shooter, although that remains to be clearly established. And the question of who is really behind this remains the haunting question behind all this. What I think is fascinating, it's only a possibility, but I think this would really set things off, would be if this was something that was somehow done either with the involvement or the knowledge of one Lyndon Baines Johnson, who became, of course, the president right after JFK. So if you want to know someone who benefited directly from the JFK assassination, it was certainly Lyndon Johnson. And not just the man in becoming president, he was able to push through his agenda. Think about like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which came really just on the heels of the JFK assassination. So Johnson was able to escalate the Vietnam War, part of his agenda, push through on certain other measures, domestic measures, expand the Great Society. He had enormous power, at least at the very beginning of his administration. I want to talk about a second topic now, which is the issue of the invalidating the Biden pardons, something that I talked about yesterday. I think the key here for Trump is to push this into court and demand discovery. And I say this because the current defense that people are making of Biden is that, well, so what if he signed the pardons with an auto pen? You're allowed to do presidential signatures with an auto pen. This, I think, is a deflection and diversion from the real issue. The real issue is not the auto pen. Of course, the president can sign with an automatic pen. The issue is, was Biden mentally cognizant when he signed or when he authorized the use of the auto pen? That's the issue, and that is an issue that demands discovery. Now, we already have in the congressional record, I see it right here, February 14, 2024, the quotation from the special counsel, Robert Hur, that Biden is too far gone, too non-compos mentis, too forgetful and senile to be able to stand trial. Well, if he's too forgetful to stand trial, that means he's really not in command of his faculties. I think the interesting thing about forcing the issue on this and demanding discovery is you get all kinds of information about who was really running the U.S. government for the past 4 years. This is something that Democrats do not. They don't want this can of worms, this Pandora's box. They don't want to lift the screen on this scandal, and it is a major scandal, and it was done with, I think, widespread knowledge on the part not only of people in the administration and the White House, because there were cabinet officials who knew that cabinet meetings didn't really happen. There were leaders in Congress who knew that they could never get through to Biden. There was just a handful of aides who intercepted all the communications. So this, to me, is the scandal behind the scandal. It's not just about the pardons. It's really about which gang of unelected thugs which junta has been running the country from 2020 to 2024. And this brings me to my main topic of this morning, which is Judge Boasberg. Debbie told me this morning on the way to the podcast that Chief Justice John Roberts has said, well, it's not good to impeach these judges. You don't need to impeach them. There is an appellate process, and that's why it's there. I assume that Roberts is coming somewhat half-heartedly to the defense of the judiciary, but I think he's also trying to prevent the idea that if there's an outrageous decision, however outrageous, that you follow the process and don't go the impeachment route. Now, the impeachment route, which, by the way, is being led in the House by my own son-in-law, Brandon Gill, he's drafted the legislation. Trump has endorsed it. Trump has come out saying, impeach these guys, and Trump put out a very tempestuous, somewhat hot-headed tweet about Judge Boasberg. I think this is really what provoked Chief Justice Roberts' comment and attempted interception, you could call it. But look, I think the impeachment thing is good because it puts a spotlight on these rogue judges. These judges right now all think that they have the ability to intercept the president whenever they feel like it and issue a national injunction. Even if it's a temporary injunction, it stops the president in his tracks, even in areas that are of unquestioned presidential authority. So my message to Roberts is this: if you don't want to see impeachments, come in. The Supreme Court should intervene here and send a message to these district judges that, look, we understand that there are legitimate issues of constitutional interpretation. No one is saying that when the Constitution is ambiguous, that there needs to be judicial review. We get that, and we get that that process goes from the district court to the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. What do you do, though, when you have judges that take the plain language of the Constitution that assigns power to the executive authority of the president and just say he doesn't have it, or we're going to take a few months to kind of scratch our heads and figure this one out? What's the president supposed to do? Well, what if a judge tells the president that he can't order a strike on Iran? Then what? Does he have to hold up the strike for the appellate process to go forward, even though the president is clearly the commander-in-chief? What do you do when Judge Boasberg says, turn the flights around? Turn the flights around. First of all, the 5 men who filed the case are in the United States, so their fate is not at issue. Nobody has sent them anywhere. They're still here. The case continues. But what if you take other people that are deemed to be a danger to the country under this act that goes back to the 18th century, that authorizes the president to use his executive power? He's using his executive power. He's removed these guys. They're on flights. The flights are now outside of U.S. airspace. They are in international airspace governed by international laws, and some of them are subject to agreements with other countries that the president is perfectly authorized to make. Should judges be able to say, that's okay, forget about the international waters, turn the flights back, doesn't matter if you made agreements with El Salvador or other countries, abrogate those agreements until I sort it out? What? So the Trump administration has filed a stinging brief, and I think this is beautifully done, by the way, before the same Judge Boasberg, telling him to vacate these proceedings. And here is their argument. Number one, courts cannot interfere with the president's national security and foreign affairs authority. Number two, courts don't even have jurisdiction to examine or second-guess that authority. Therefore, this judge should vacate this hearing and, quote, de-escalate the grave incursions on executive branch authority that have already arisen. Now, the brief goes on to make a kind of a subtle argument, and that is the president has an executive order, and the executive order is what is being subject now to judicial scrutiny. Judge Boasberg is basically saying that under the executive order, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or we have to have a trial to figure out what you can and can't do, or I get to second guess what this executive order means and whether it's consistent with the act and with the Constitution. But Trump says, that doesn't cancel out the fact that I have broad executive authority that doesn't derive from this specific act that authorizes me to conduct executive action and foreign policy. And so think of it this way. I've issued an executive order, and 5 people have sued through the ACLU, claiming that this executive order is somehow wrongly worded or too broadly construed or whatever. Trump goes, that doesn't cancel out my executive authority in every other area. I can still fight against the gangs. I can still deal with the cartels. I can still authorize the deportation of dangerous criminals abroad. I can send them to their home countries or even to third countries if I want. There's nothing that restricts my executive authority to do that. And therefore, says this brief, these other people who are not plaintiffs in this case are not covered by the judge's order. It goes on to say that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And so when you say something like there's an invasion of the country, these criminal aliens are invading our country, the real question is not, the act of course authorizes the president to act in the event of such an invasion, but the real issue is who gets to decide if there is an invasion, Judge Boasberg or Trump? In whose discretion is it to make that determination? This is really the issue before the court. And essentially the Trump administration is saying that the act could not be more clear. We have the right. The executive branch makes those. It's not up to judges to be deciding, oh, well, let me see. Let me decide if I think there's been an invasion. No, I guess I don't think there has been. This is a madness. This is not how our system is supposed to work. So this is a grave abuse of power by Boasberg. And again, coming back to Chief Justice Roberts, if he doesn't want this to go the impeachment route, there is a better route. And that is to instruct the judiciary to rein it in, to recognize that you have legitimate authority, but you also are using, as in this case, illegitimate authority to subvert the president from doing something that seems to be within his prerogative and his constitutionally assigned power to do. Debbie and I care about our health, and we've come across a remarkable device that is a total game changer. We've integrated it into our daily routine. It's called Juvent Micro Impact Platform. It's based on the latest cutting-edge science. It uses micro-impact frequency to promote joint health, improve bone density, boost circulation, and even stimulate the production of stem cells in your body. It's crazy, right? But it works. All you have to do is stand on it. I stand on it for about 10 or 12 minutes a day. Debbie stands on it a little longer. Anyway, that's it. It makes those crinks and stiffness and aches and pains vanish, and it can even add up to 5 years to your life. Wow. You got to learn about this new technology. There's a lot to learn, and it's not to be confused with some of those gimmicky vibration plates out there. So go to juvent.com/Dinesh to learn more. That's Juvent, JUVENT.com/Dinesh. They've got a really good deal for you right now, $500 off, 10-year warranty, financing options, even a 6-week buyback promise, because they believe in the product so much. Juvent can change your life. Check it out. Learn more. Go to juvent.com/Dinesh. President Trump's 2024 victory wasn't just an election, it was a movement. The American people stood up, fought back, and reclaimed their country. But the fight isn't just about politics, it's also about culture. For too long, Hollywood has dictated what we watch, what we think, and what we value. But now, a revolution is underway. A grassroots film studio, powered by we the people, is taking back our culture. From Sound of Freedom, a courageous film that exposed an evil the elites would rather keep hidden, to movies that honor faith, family, and country like Homestead, Angel Studios is redefining what storytelling should be. And here's the best part. You get to be part of it by joining the Angel Guild. You get a say in what stories get made. You're not just watching, you're shaping a culture that reflects your values. Hollywood won't fix itself, the media won't change, but we the people can build something better. Angel Studios is proof of that. Find out more. Go to angel.com/Dinesh today. Join the movement. Support the films that matter. Let's take our culture back. Angel.com/Dinesh. The issue of transgender rights covers a number of different things. One, of course, is the issue of men and women, or biological males and females, being in sports together on the same team or competing against each other. That's one issue. Debbie actually makes an interesting point in this regard. We keep hearing about these trans women, which is to say biological males who want to participate in women's sports. we never hear about the opposite. How about trans men? How many biological women want to go box against a man, go enter the men's division of boxing, or sprinting, or swimming for that matter, or weightlifting? Any of it doesn't happen. It happens only in one direction, doesn't it? That alone is very telling. Well, that's one part of it. The second is the trans propaganda to children. You can transition yourself. You can, as a 3-year-old, do you really identify as a boy or a girl? So you have all that stuff going on. Then you have the issue of adults who are trans and who demand to be addressed by their pronouns. A good example of this would be the Congress. I don't know whether to say congressman or congresswoman, but anyway, it's Sarah McBride, a biological male who wears a dress and is in fact Brandon's neighbor, or has the office next door to Brandon Gill in the Longworth building. So you have that issue. But then there is also the issue of the locker rooms. And this is an issue that Riley Gaines brought attention to, the whole discomfort of young girls when you have biological men in the locker room and you have to change in front of them. You've got to go find a corner where you can do that. Well, here's an interesting description by a mom who has filed a civil rights complaint about this in Illinois about her daughter. Her daughter's a 13-year-old. And the complaint claims that a middle school in Illinois forced a whole class of 13-year-old girls to change in front of a trans-identified male after the physical education class. And this is what happened. This is the mom is Nicole Georges. She was on Fox yesterday talking about this. And she says that this February, her daughter came home very frightened, very upset, after finding a male student in the girls' bathroom. So the mom contacted the administration, and the administration said that their legal counsel had told them that any student who identifies as female can use any of the facilities that they chose. And then the mom says that this male student was then showing up in the locker rooms for PE class. And the girls didn't want to change. So they all said, we're not going to undress in front of this guy. And then what happened is, the following day, Assistant Principal Kathy Van Treese, this is the principal in the Deerfield School District in Illinois, she hauls the girls into her office, she questions them, then escorts them to the locker room and makes them change into their uniforms with the boy or with the biological male present. Van Treese was accompanied by Assistant Superintendent Joanna Ford and Director for Student Services Ginger Logman. And apparently this monitoring occurred all week, and its purpose was to get these girls to be forcibly accustomed to this happening. Now, the mom is outraged. She says, my daughter refused to take part in having her privacy violated, and she ran out and called me for help. And then the school told her, well, we're just going to put your daughter into a different PE class. And the mom said no. So apparently under Illinois state law, trans-identified individuals have the right to go to whatever facilities they please. This is why the legal department for the school took this position. And apparently, according to the state's Department of Human Rights, quote, the discomfort or privacy concerns of other students are not valid reasons to deny or limit the full and equal use of facilities based on a student's gender-related identity. Now, here is where we have a very interesting clash, because while Illinois has passed this trans-friendly law, and while the school is relying on that in making its interpretation, we have to deal with federal law, and this is where the Trump administration comes in. One of Trump's executive orders could not be more clear. No school that doesn't follow the Title IX of the Equal Amendments Act of 1972, which is to say to treat boys and girls separately, not to discriminate against girls by inflicting on them the presence of boys in the locker room. The executive order signed by Trump basically says you have to follow this federal rule, or you're not going to get any federal funding, and you could well be investigated by the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. And this is exactly what this mom has done. She has filed a civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice, and she has also filed a complaint with the Department of Education. Quote, "The girls want their privacy and they want their locker room back. This is my daughter's story and the story of many other young girls who have been forced at a difficult age to do something that they know and most adults know is wrong." So here, I think this mom is putting her finger on something that is very important, and that is that a lot of people are going along with all this because they are in a state of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is the phrase made famous by the psychologist Martin Seligman. It's the idea that you get, and in fact, it becomes a weapon in the hands of the left. They brutalize you to such an extent that you develop this learned helplessness. There's nothing we can do. We're the Boy Scouts, but we have to take girls. We're in the women's locker room, but we have to undress in front of boys. That's the law. That's the rule. There's nothing can be done about it. We can't change the rule. We can't challenge the rule. And so what we're seeing with Trump and what we're seeing with this mom is some action. And it takes a price, because when the mom raised a ruckus about this, there were a bunch of trans activists. They began to insult her, attack her, claim that she was misrepresenting the situation. They said, you can't talk about girls being forced to change in front of a boy because this is not a boy. This is a transgender girl. So this is the kind of bare-knuckled bullying that the left specializes in and that moms have to deal with if they begin to speak out. Fortunately, I think these MAGA moms are pretty tough, and they are willing to give back as good as they get, and they're willing now to take action. It used to be that the weaponry of the government, both the local government, imagine if this was the Biden-Harris administration or the Harris administration, the federal government would be on the side of the state government, so the overwhelming force of local and federal government would be coming down on this mom. But at least now she has an ally in the Trump administration, and so the outcome of this remains to be determined, but I suspect it's going to turn out quite differently. Numbers don't lie. The impact that balance of nature makes every single day is pretty astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself on their website. Go to balanceofnature.com. Listen to a few stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories reported each month. Hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of these. These are fruits and veggies in a capsule. These are fruit and veggie supplements consumed by people who have decided to start living better. There's only one number missing, and that's you. Do what I did. Add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements like so many others around the world. And here's another number that should get your attention. 35%. Use my discount code AMERICA. You get 35% off plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. Call 800-246-8751. Again, 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code AMERICA, you get 35% off plus free shipping. MyPillow is excited to announce they are extending the mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. And this is your chance to grab some incredible deals on MyPillow's most popular and newly released items. For example, save $40 on the new spring MyPillow bed sheets, available in any size, any color. These luxurious sheets are designed for maximum comfort and breathability, perfect for a great night's sleep. Looking for a meaningful gift? Save 30% on the brand new My Crosses, inspired by the one Mike Lindell has worn every day for over 20 years. These beautifully crafted crosses come in both men's and women's designs and are proudly made in the USA. Get the 6-piece bath or kitchen towel sets for just $29.98. Initial quantities are low, so don't wait. And don't forget the best-selling standard MyPillow, now just $14.98. Plus orders over $75 ship free. Call 800-876-0227. Again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com and just make sure to use the promo code, which is DINESH, Dinesh. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast a new guest, Dr. Joel Kahn. He's a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University School of Medicine, and he is a practicing cardiologist. He's representing the company Brightcore. You can follow him on X at mybrightcore or the website mybrightcore.com/Dinesh. Dr. Khan has actually been on a whole bunch of TV shows, including, well, Dr. Phil, The Doctor Show, Dr. Oz, Larry King, and Joe Rogan. Dr. Khan, welcome. Thank you for joining me. We're at a time when there's a lot of attention, including some political attention, to issues of health, issues of natural immunity. We're hearing now about a measles outbreak. Can you talk a little bit about what is perhaps the most important thing that we should know in resisting all these things that our body is facing today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big fan. Love 2000 Mules. Just wanted to give you a shout out and your other work. But it seems like, for now the last 5-6 years, we can't exist in the political world without a health pandemic crisis. And you're right. Right now, bird flu is kind of fading out, but I don't think we're done with bird flu. And the measles is the topic of the day, all the way to Capitol Hill and Bobby Kennedy and all. And, we need to take it seriously. I'm not an infectious disease doctor or pediatrician, but one can read the medical literature. The number of cases this year, which is about at 301, isn't completely out of range, but it's early in the year. The number of outbreaks isn't completely out of range. Of course, we've heard of 1 or maybe 2 deaths, which is tragic, but hopefully we won't see those numbers escalate. And people will have to decide, as Secretary Kennedy has said, that people should have the right to decide on vaccination or not. I do urge people to look at, this is a bit of a controversial statement, how many deaths per year are actually reported to the government from getting the measles vaccine. And I will tell you, it exceeds the reported deaths per year from the disease. It's something that causes one to pause and make an individual decision about vaccination. But moving beyond that, I was disappointed during the pandemic we didn't hear more about natural immunity, natural health, build up your body. If just one person had made a national campaign for better nutrition, better fitness, better sleep, healthy weight loss, maybe some vitamin D to optimize your vitamin D level, or even omega-3. And at that time, we already had plenty of insight that had an impact on, if not preventing the disease, but at least the severity of the disease. But you just didn't hear that in mainstream medicine. I spoke about it. I got beat up on social media and exited from social media because I suggested people pursue natural nutrition. But, that great man Hippocrates said several thousand years ago, all disease begins in the gut, and also all health begins in the gut. 70 to 80% of our immune system, people don't know this, exists in the gut. And what most impacts with our intestines, what we choose to eat. That's number one. And we know you can improve your health. I call it the rainbow diet, all the beautiful, healthy fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds that should be on your plate with yellows and purples and whites and all. But in my clinic, I'm in suburban Detroit, we teach the 2 F's. The 2 F's are fermentation and fiber. And I tell you, the national conversation right now should be Americans are not eating enough fiber, and they're certainly not eating enough fermented foods, because we have, some people say, 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria living in our intestines. It's like a whole community in there. It's absolutely fascinating. We call it the microbiome, but it's gut bugs. We got, 100 trillion gut bugs living inside of us. We don't think about it. And there's actually 10 times more gut bugs than there are human cells. There's way more bacterial DNA than there is human DNA in our body. But we don't even think about this 3, 4, 5 pounds of friends we carry with us. And, if you buy a Lamborghini, you're going to put premium fuel. Well, we got a Lamborghini microbiome, but we don't put premium fuel. We put sugar and alcohol, and we buy fast food, and we buy frozen pizza, and we don't learn how to cook anymore. We don't make a good dal or a good natural food that every culture has to feed our gut. But fiber comes from plants. There's no fiber in junk foods. There's no fiber in animal foods, really. And fermentation, traditionally, every culture, your background culture, my background culture, we all have some fermented food. And, by now the viewers may hear by my voice, or if they're watching this, know that I'm not Korean. I did not grow up with kimchi as one of the fermented foods, but it started to catch my eye as a regular reader of medical science. And I saw reports about the health benefits to the immune system, and then beyond that, to kimchi, a traditional cabbage-based spiced fermented dish, number one most popular food in Korea, a superfood for several thousand years in Korea. And all because of really an article about a year ago where I read that there was what scientists call best science, randomized double-blind study of kimchi capsules versus a placebo capsule, that it led to weight loss and fat burning. And that's what we all dream of. Let's take a capsule and lose a little fat. But this was real science. And I searched for kimchi capsules. I couldn't find them. And then I stumbled actually across a YouTube banner that said Kimchi One by My Bright Core Nutrition. And I ended up ordering it and have been on it ever since, as my entire family has been on it. And I can tell you there's actually another research study about hair growth with fermented foods focused on kimchi, cabbage, and spices that are fermented in a traditional Korean way. And I actually have to go to the barber more often now. That's a true testimonial. I mean, I'm not making it up. It's only been a little more than half a year, but my hair grows faster because of my own use of dried kimchi capsules. So Kimchi One is fascinating. It's a cold drying process that retains the fiber, retains all these probiotics, all these amazing little healthy bacteria. We estimate that there's hundreds of bacteria in kimchi. But these capsules, Kimchi One, just make it convenient to get a dose of kimchi and the health benefits. Support your gut, support your immune system, maybe help your weight struggle that so many people have. Maybe if you're a little bit vain like I am in my mid-60s and you don't want to lose your hair, support that. That's based on science. And maybe just in general, support your health. So that brings us to, my level of excitement in a cardiology clinic. I want my patients to be healthy. I don't want them to, develop colds and flus and viruses. And if you focus on a healthy gut with fresh foods, colorful foods, fiber and fermentation, which Kimchi One provides so well, it really goes well because of the probiotics, because of the fiber, and just even in our gut, there's certain special bacteria that make chemicals. They're called short chain fatty acids, and they make our gut strong. We all get toxins in our food. You can't help it. We hear about the dyes and the colorings and the additives. We need a wall of our gut that doesn't let all that stuff into the body. It's fine if it stays in the intestines. So it turns out when you eat a lot of fiber and you eat a lot of fermented foods, you make that wall. We all hear about a wall on the southern border. Let's talk about a wall in our intestines. You make that wall stronger and you don't absorb those toxins with the same degree. And food is medicine. That's a statement everybody should wake up and go to sleep with. Kimchi One is a great example of food as a medicine. It's just convenient, easy, and it doesn't matter on your ethnic background. It's a great choice.
Yeah, I was going to say the Koreans have been eating it for centuries, but you're saying now it's just available in capsule form, and it combines the two things you talked about earlier, right? You talked about high fiber content, you talked about fermentation, and you're saying that all of this is now packed into this superfood. You can take it through in capsule form, and it has a wide range of health benefits. It's good for brain health. It's good for hair. You mentioned hair loss. And it's good also maybe for losing some pounds.
Why not? We all in America and many countries could use a little slimmer waistline. And if Kimchi One scientifically can do that, and you don't lose muscle, you lose fat. So I'm excited. Apparently, My Bright Core Nutrition has arranged 25% off if people order at My Bright Core Nutrition with your name, the code Dinesh. And I'm sure you'll repeat that, Dinesh. But what they really encourage people to do, my friends at My Bright Core Nutrition, is to call them, because they're actually, you'd mentioned that you heard about this on the Dinesh D'Souza show, and you get 50% off if you call. I'll give you the phone number in a minute, plus free shipping, plus they'll send a free bottle of vitamin D3. We just talked about vitamin D as another pathway to better immune health. We're hearing about bird flu, hearing about measles. There's an article in the New York Times today by Ralph Baric, a rather notorious scientist, about more coronavirus. Get a bottle of vitamin D3 for free. Get your Kimchi One at a 50% off with free shipping. And that phone number, I got to look it up, is 888-927-5980. 888-927-5980. Just pick up the phone and order a bottle like I did months ago. And I'll continue to order because frankly, I don't get 50% off. I'm just going to call when we're done and order the same way. And I can't think of anybody that wouldn't benefit. You know, it's always a question. Is there anybody that shouldn't take Kimchi One? It does have dried cabbage. I mean, cabbage is part of the broccoli family. It's one of the healthiest of foods, and not everybody eats it. You know, we had St. Patrick's Day, and some people probably ate some corned beef and cabbage. Get fermented cabbage. Now we're talking super health.
I mean, you know, we've started ordering and from Brightcore, and Debbie had a kind of amusing exchange with the guys at Brightcore, because she's like, I want more of this stuff. And they're like, we'll send it to you. And Debbie's like, no, don't send it to us. We don't necessarily want the free product. We want to be able to order because we're benefiting from this, and it's great stuff. I want to repeat this deal because it's kind of unusual, to be honest. You get 25% off if you just go to the website, right? And the website is mybrightcore.com. /Dinesh. But there's a double benefit if you call. And actually, I advise people to do that because then they can talk to someone and they'll have questions. They can kind of work through, they can learn more, and they can get personalized advice. And that number is 888-927-5980. So if you call that number, it's 50% off plus free shipping and a free bottle of vitamin D, which is a fantastic deal. Guys, I've been talking to Dr. Joel Kahn, clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University. Follow him on X at MyBrightCore. The website, again, mybrightcore.com /Dinesh. Dr. Kahn, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Hero.
I'm in the preface to the Reagan book, How an Ordinary Man Became an Extraordinary Leader. And when I left off yesterday, I was talking about all these wise men who insisted that the Soviet Union was here to stay. And Strobe Talbot, who was a longtime senior correspondent at Time magazine, later he served in the Clinton State Department, he says that Reagan and his allies espouse, quote, the early 50s goal, by 50s he means 1950s, goal of rolling back Soviet domination of Eastern Europe. He says this is absolutely absurd. In fact, he says, quote, Reagan is counting on American technological and economic predominance to prevail in the end. He's scoffing at Reagan, saying, ha, 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 that's never going to happen. And Talbot concludes by saying that if the Soviet economy has any kind of crisis, quote, it is a permanent institutional crisis with which the USSR has learned to live. In other words, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to come falling down. Eastern Europe isn't going to be liberated. Here's another prominent Sovietologist. Now, this is not a term we use anymore, Sovietologist. A Sovietologist was an expert not just in Russia or Russian history, but specifically in the Soviet Union. This is Stephen Cohen of Princeton University, writing in 1983. Quote, all evidence indicates that the Reagan administration has abandoned both containment and détente for a very different objective, destroying the Soviet Union as a world power and possibly even its communist system. So you can even feel the derision and the condescension in here. Reagan has gone beyond containment, Containment was the idea advanced by George Kennan, the diplomat in the 1950s. Contain the Soviet Union. Don't try to overthrow it. Just contain it. Draw a kind of ring around it. And détente is simply a term, again, a term that's gone out of use, but détente had to do with a kind of modus vivendi. Modus vivendi means a way to live together, a kind of pact, a mutual agreement, often solidified with treaties, aimed at keeping the status quo between the Soviet Union and the United States. But so in a way, Stephen Cohen is right. Reagan was abandoning containment and détente. He was, in fact, trying to destroy the Soviet Union as a world power and possibly even its communist system. So Cohen accurately summarizes what Reagan is doing, but he completely fails to see that Reagan is about to do it. And then I say, we shouldn't be too hard on the wise men because people often do get it wrong. Arthur Schlesinger says, history has an abiding capacity to outwit our certitudes. True. But guess what? When we hear that no one foresaw these developments, no one saw it coming, it was all a big surprise, we have to remember that the dummy foresaw them. So Reagan foresaw them. Reagan not only predicted the fall of the Soviet Union, he then acted to bring it about. 1980, this is Reagan. He was meeting with some editors of the Washington Post, and Lou Cannon, who was covering Reagan at the time, said that Reagan made the statement, the Soviets cannot compete with us. And everyone around the room looked at each other and they're like, what kind of madness is this? And Cannon says, I'll get the Soviets to the negotiating table. But Cannon goes, when he said that, no one believed him. In 1981, Reagan went to the University of Notre Dame, and he said this, quote, the West won't contain communism. It will transcend communism. It will dismiss it as some bizarre chapter in human history whose last pages are even now being written. Reagan said the same thing the next year in a speech before the National Association of Evangelicals. 1982, Reagan is speaking before the British Parliament. And by the way, you can go online and search these speeches and watch them. They're really interesting to watch with the benefit of hindsight, just because of how prescient, how clairvoyant they are. Here's Reagan. In an ironic sense, he says Karl Marx was right. We are witnessing today a great revolutionary crisis, but the crisis isn't happening in the free non-Marxist West. It's happening in the home of Marxism-Leninism in the Soviet Union. And then he goes on to say that if the Western alliance remains strong, it will produce, quote, a march of freedom and democracy which will leave Marxism-Leninism on the ash heap of history. Think again how outrageous these words seemed when Reagan said them in 1982, if you can think back that far, or if you were even alive then. And then, of course, we go to 1987. Reagan is at the Berlin Wall. Come here to this gate, open this gate, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And I write, not long after this, the wall did come tumbling down, and Reagan's prophecies all came true. So let me back up here to outline the two rival views here. The view that was the mainstream view, believed by the liberals and the conservatives alike, was that the Soviet Union was a permanent institution. It was going nowhere. And the disagreement was how to deal with it. Here there were two camps. The liberal camp was appease it, be easy on it, don't press them, don't rock the boat. By and large, seek peace agreements. We will have some security in those parchment deals that we can make with the Soviet Union. And these were called the SALT treaties. SALT I, there was SALT II. And this is all the stuff that went on in the 70s all the way until Reagan came to office. The conservative view was very similar. The Soviet Union is here to stay. There's nothing we can do about it. In fact, there was an almost mystical sense of how powerful the Soviet Union was. And I remember now, even in the 80s, reading innumerable articles in Commentary and many other journals about how the Soviets were close to being invincible. They were stronger than we were. They had more nuclear weapons. They had bigger missiles, more warheads, not to mention the fact that the Soviets were seen somewhat like the jihadis, namely, they don't really have a sense of rationality, or they don't have a good sense about protecting their own lives. They are a little unhinged. And so we have to treat them very delicately because of what they might do. Now, the conservative view was that they only understand the language of strength, and so we should build up our own military. You can see here how this view did overlap with Reagan's, but the key point of disagreement was that Reagan believed we can defeat them, and we will. They're not as strong as you think. There are economic and other types of vulnerabilities in the Soviet Union that we can exploit. So Reagan, in this sense, was arguing on his own. Not that Reagan's argument was completely original, but there was no other leader on the world scene saying any of this. Now, when Reagan said it, there were leaders in the West who liked Reagan, who then kind of lined up behind the Reagan view. I'm thinking here of Margaret Thatcher, notably in Great Britain. Slowly, Mitterrand, who was the president of France, came along, and Helmut Kohl, who was at that time the president, the head of Germany, he also ultimately became a supporter. But all these other Western leaders were sort of drawn into the Reagan orbit. Reagan was the one who was out front making these arguments. So this is how I close out the preface. The most powerful empire in human history imploded. It just collapsed on itself, just like Reagan said it would. Now, when I say implosion, kind of implies that it happened all by itself. I don't actually mean that. I mean that U.S. policies put sufficient pressure on the Soviet Union, and not U.S. policies alone. I agree that there was cooperation from the Western Alliance, from NATO. There were other important figures who played a key role, Pope John Paul II, later Lech Walesa, who led the protests in Poland. So nevertheless, all of this came together to see the disintegration of the Soviet Empire, which began with the liberation of Eastern Europe and then penetrated into the Soviet Union itself. And I say these were not just results Reagan predicted. He intended the outcome. He advocated and promoted policies that were aimed at producing it. He was denounced for those policies, yet in the end, his objective was achieved. And then I close this preface by saying, if Reagan was such a fool, what does that make the wise men? What does that make us? And we'll pick it up now tomorrow with chapter 1, a chapter which is called Why Reagan Gets No Respect. Borrowing from Rodney Dangerfield, Why Reagan Gets No Respect.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.